My presentation is entitled Laissez le bon temps, rouler, Cajun music's winding path through American history. Now, one of the first questions I'm typically asked about Cajun music is, what is Cajun music? The Webster definition would be that Cajun music is popular music of southern Louisiana that combines tunes of French origins with elements of Caribbean music and the blues, and that uses guitar, washboard, and accordion. There is so much more to Cajun music than just this. To truly appreciate Cajun music, you have to understand a little bit about their historic background to enjoy it. The Cajun story begins around the 1750s amongst the Acadian people in eastern Canada. With the conclusion of the French and Indian War, the British wrestled control of the Acadian region from the French. The British soon came to the conclusion that they could no longer ignore the presence of the Francophone Acadians, who not only had ties to their homeland in France, but also had close ties to the Wabanaki Confederacy, one of the main opponents to the British. The Wabanaki Confederacy was comprised of 5 North American tribes, including the Penobscot, the Abenaki, the Micmac, the Passamaquoddy, and the Milicete people. There was a fair amount of intermarrying with the French Catholics in Acadia and the Wabanaki people that helped to establish a new type of people called the French Canadians. Out of concern, the Acadians would continue to support the Wabanaki Confederacy and perhaps be a conduit for the French influence in North America. The British required the Acadians to swear an oath of loyalty and become British citizens. Many of the Acadians refused to do this for 2 reasons. The first reason was that the Acadians were Roman Catholic and the English were Anglican. The second reason was they did not want to end up fighting the French at a later time. This led to what was called the Great Expulsion or the Great Upheaval, which was basically the deportation of 11,500 Acadians to various American colonies, England, the Caribbean, and some to France, starting in 1755 and ending sometime around 1764. Around 1765, many of the Acadians who were expelled to France later migrated to Louisiana, which was at the time under Spanish rule, Louisiana having been ceded to Spain in 1762. According to Barry Jean Ancelet, who is one of the foremost experts on Cajun music in his book, Cajun Music, Its Origins and Development. Though songs about the exile experience do not seem to have survived, the upheaval would have an effect on the Acadian music. The suffering they had endured endowed their songs with a preoccupation with death, loneliness, lost love, and their instrumental music with a mournful quality. This event was written about by Longfellow in his epic poem, Evangeline, A Tale of Acadie. The poem recounts a story of an Acadian girl named Evangeline and her separation and search for her lost love, Gabriel, during the time of the expulsion. The poem helped to define the Acadian identity in the 19th and 20th centuries, in that it romanticized the plight of the Acadians and their history and stirred up interest in many who read the poem. While individual songs did not survive the exile period, the music traditions of the Acadians did. These traditions can still be found in Cajun music today, and one of the chief genres of this music that they brought with them to Louisiana is ballads, which is mostly unaccompanied vocal songs that tell a story. To name a few songs, Tout un boussoir and La Belle et le Capitaine. The first recording I'm going to play for you is Tout un boussoir, which translates, I believe, to A Beautiful Evening. It is an Alan Lomax recording of Alida Hoffpair performing in South Louisiana around 1930s. The song is about a woodsman and a shepherdess on the edge of an enchanted forest. The shepherdess makes a deal with the woodsman that if he will spare the trees, she will keep his glass filled with wine.
Au soir, en me promenant autour du long du petit bois charmant, tout un beau soir, en me promenant autour du long du petit bois charmant, quand je vois là-bas, je vois venir une bergère, ça me fit rappeler la seule que mon cœur aime. Quand je vois là-bas, je vois venir une bergère, ça me fit rappeler le seul que mon cœur aime. Belle bergère, jolie bergère, de quoi vous faites dans ces bois? Belle bergère, jolie bergère, de quoi vous faites dans ces bois?
Another example of a ballad-style song that owes its roots to Acadia is La Belle et le Capitaine, or The Beautiful Girl and the Captain. The song recounts the story of a young girl who is taken from her father's home by a captain. She chooses death rather than to be with him, and the final verse tells about 3 days later, her ghost comes knocking on her father's door to tell him that she chose death rather than to lose her honor.
Jeune des trois, la prit par sa main blanche, le plus jeune des trois, la prit par sa main blanche, montez, montez la belle, dessus mon cheval gris, au logis chez mon père, je vous emmènerai. Quand la belle entend, elle s'est mise à pleurer. Quand la belle entend, elle s'est mise à pleurer. Soupez, soupez la belle, prenez-vous appétit auprès du capitaine, vous passerez la nuit. Quand la belle...
As you can hear, the song was mostly unaccompanied. There was a fiddle drone to give the harmony, but this song was performed by the Magnolia Sisters in LA, California, around, I believe, 2013. As the music of the Acadians took root and grew in their new homeland, it also received more and more influences from other traditions. Some of these influences included music from the Irish, the Scottish, and the Native Americans. There was also influence with the Spanish, the Jewish German immigrants, and the African Americans as well. According to Ancelet, from the Indians, they learned a terraced style of singing and new dance rhythms. From the blacks, they learned the blues, percussion techniques, and a love of syncopation and improvisational singing. From the Spanish, they may have learned a few tunes as well. One of the most distinguishing qualities of a Cajun band is the use of the accordion. And this most Cajun of instruments was actually also inherited from outside of Louisiana. The diatonic accordion was first invented in Vienna in 1828 and was brought over by the Jewish German immigrants around the same time. Partly because of the instrument's resilience to the harsh environment and the unique sound quality, the Acadians began to make it a part of their music on a regular basis near the end of the 19th century. We can also see influences of the Anglo-American immigrants in Cajun music as well. They introduced new fiddle tunes and dance tunes, such as the Virginia reel, hoedowns, and square dances. In addition to this, the Anglo-Americans introduced their own new ballads, such as The Carpenter's Wife or The Demon Lover, which was translated into French as Je mariais un ouvrier. This song has roots to Celtic Britain and Scotland, and many believe that the coast described in the original tune refers to the banks of Italy. However, it is more likely that the French version came from the American translation around 1958, since they both mention the banks of Old Tennessee. The ballad tells about a young wife who's married to a carpenter, but leaves him for a sailor. Near the end of the story, she becomes remorseful as she realizes that she will no longer see her family again. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is also one of the leading bands in Cajun music, Beau Soulier, and this was recorded around 2014.
Mariais un ouvrier, moi qui étais si vaillante fille, mais c'était de ma dépasser sans attraper des proches. Mais quitte ton ouvrier et viens t'endosser avec moi, oh viens t'endosser avec moi, dessous les côtes du Tennessee, dessous les côtes du Tennessee, croise-toi pour m'entretenir. Pastore pour m'entraîner dessous les côtes du Tennessee. J'ai né des gros navets.
Above all, however, Cajun tunes are dance tunes. The Cajuns are famous for their insatiable love of dancing, and even during Lent, when instrumental music is forbidden, the Acadians of old would get around this religious constriction by singing, clapping, and stomping. A quote from C.C. Robbins, which I found in Anslet's book as well, tells us, "The Acadians love to dance most of all, more than any other people in the colony. At one time during the year, they give balls for travelers and will go 10 or 15 leagues to attend one. Everyone dances, even grandmère and grandpère, no matter what the difficulties they must bear. There may be only a couple of fiddles to play for the crowd. There may be only 4 candles for light placed on wooden arms attached to the wall. Nothing but wooden benches to sit on, and exceptionally, a few bottles of tefia diluted with water for refreshment. No matter, everyone dances." Today, if you were to visit southern Louisiana, one of the common names for a Cajun dance or get-together that you might run across is called fido-do. Many believe that the expression fido-do comes from the practice of lulling young children to sleep in the back of the dance halls, and basically translates to the phrase, "go to sleep." It has since been used as a lullaby for young children, and others believe that the term actually comes from the dance step do-si-do. Here's a recording of a typical style you would run across if you went to a fido-do. This recording is once again the Magnolia Sisters, from 2010 in LA, California. The song they're performing is Mag Hop and features Anne Savoy, Jane Verdreen, Lisa Tran, and Ania Burgess. This is a pretty typical Cajun ensemble. You have the fiddle, the accordion, the voice, the guitar, washboard sometimes, but you would also see triangle as well. As you can see, this is a pretty typical ensemble. Not all Cajun music has triangle or washboard. They kind of play whatever instruments come to hand. There are even stories about a fiddle player taking the screen door off his parents' house and making a violin and playing with a shoelace for his bow. So Cajun culture, after the expulsion, was one of the most impoverished groups in southern Louisiana and considered themselves rather a proud and independent type of people. Their goal to immigrating to Louisiana was to create a new France. So when the Civil War rolled around, they overall did not consider themselves a part of the conflict. In fact, many of the Acadians referred to the Civil War as the Confederates' War. However, during the Civil War, we do start seeing some very significant changes to the music and the culture. To quote from Shane Bernard, a historian who specializes in the Cajun culture, in his book, The Cajuns, Americanization of a People. The American Revolution, the Civil War, Reconstruction, and World War I influenced the ethnic group. Of these, the Civil War had the greatest impact. For by destroying Louisiana's economy, it lowered rival ethnic groups such as the French, the Spanish, and the Germans to the same impoverished social stratum inhabited by most Acadians. As a result, these ethnic groups began to intermarry with the Acadians in sizable numbers. More than any other factor, it was this post-bellum blending process that created the people called Cajuns. Musically, this time period saw an increase in the blend of instruments such as accordion, fiddle, and triangle. We also see changes in the lyrics of many of their traditional ballads. Songs such as Une jeune fille de 4 ans, which is about a maiden who is placed in a convent where she dies of a broken heart before her lover returns from his military campaign, turns into a ballad about a woman whose fiancé goes to war on their wedding day. He tells her he will return shortly and that the war will not last long. After about 7 years, she believes herself a widow and remarries. Predictably, her first husband returns, forcing her to choose between the two. During the song, the chorus repeats a popular phrase often uttered by the Confederate soldiers as they left for the Civil War, that they would be back in 6 weeks or 2 months at the most. The Acadians remained rather isolated from the rest of the world for most of the first half of the 20th century. This was mostly due to the inaccessibility of the region. However, during the Second World War, we start seeing some very significant changes to the Cajun culture and music. One of the main challenges that we see facing the Cajun way of life is the threat of Americanization. Through the Civil War, World War I, and many other historic events, the Cajun people managed to successfully maintain a distance from the mainstream culture in America and have been able to preserve their way of life for the most extent. However, during World War II, roughly 24,500 Cajuns served in the military according to the census data. In their zeal to be viewed as Americans, many chose after the war to no longer speak Cajun French. This extended even to how they would pronounce their own names. For example, another section from Bernard's book states, "The war exerted a profound influence on the Cajun GIs, giving them a new sense of national identity and beginning the process of widespread Americanization. Proud of their wartime contributions, they came home staunch patriots, defenders of the American way of life. They had at long last become part of the national melting pot. I want to be an American," asserted Robert J. LeBlanc, explaining why even Cajun GIs who served as translators did not teach their children French after the conflict. Many South Louisiana servicemen returned home mispronouncing their own surnames in the Anglo-American manner. As there were many musical changes there were also a lot of musical changes that occurred during and after the war. For instance, accordion music began to disappear around the 1930s due to the instrument and the parts being manufactured in Germany. As mentioned, we also see a shift away from the Cajun French language used in their own music. Perhaps most importantly, though, we do start seeing around 1940s, the radio has found its way into about 40% of the Cajun homes. and with it came big band music, jazz, and Western swing. The process of Americanization continued, and with the new generation, the Cajun French language was further discouraged in schools, to the extent that the proportion of children born between 1956 and 1960 who spoke Cajun French as their primary language dropped from 83 to 21%. Zachary Richards, one of the leading Cajun and Zydeco musicians today, in an interview with CBC in 1977, spoke a little bit about the change for the Cajun people speaking French to English as a part of their status as American.
My first language, when I was a little child, at home we spoke both French and English. Because as soon as I started going to school, my parents stopped talking to me in French. But my grandparents never did speak English. So depending on where we were or what we were doing, with my friends I would always speak English. Usually, with the older people I would always talk French.
Is there pressure on the French culture there? I mean, pressure to, I don't mean a deliberate kind of contrived pressure, but is it under pressure from the mass of North America? Is it threatened?
Well, the thing about it is that the Cajun people do not feel themselves threatened by the fact that they're surrounded by, we consider ourselves to be American people. And the fact that 30 years ago, French was forbidden in the public school system in Louisiana, sort of brought on a series of events which, in my generation, means that very few people practice the French language. But all the people are still very proud to be of Acadian heritage. But since it was accomplished in my father's generation, to become a good American, to have a future in the United States, we had to speak English, and it was done willingly because it meant a better future. There's
no parallel to what has been going on.
Not really, because it's such a small community, and besides being relatively small, the community never had any literature or education. It's the people that live in Louisiana practiced or spoke French until 30 years ago because they were isolated.
Where are you finding your stuff then, Zach? Are you going back into the old heritage, the old Cajun music?
The Cajun music that I play, I started out playing, I was just another American rock and roller, you know. And 4 years ago, I got this accordion on a kind of an advance from a record company, and then I started getting into it. And it's all around me. It's all around Southwest Louisiana.
But you're very popular in Quebec, and I was talking to someone today who says that you're now catching on very largely in France. That Cajun music, and you're a big star of Cajun music, is coming back in France.
Yeah, we've been working in France for the last 3 years. Every summer we spend about 2 months there.
All these things that Zachary Richards mentioned help us to see firsthand. Oh, Richard? Oh, I'm so sorry. I do not speak French at all, but I do enjoy their history, so that's how I got into Cajun. Anyways, we get to see firsthand what it was like growing up in a southern Louisiana home post-World War II, and the family dynamics that helped to contribute to the shaping of Cajun music and culture. It was in this post-war era that Cajun music perhaps received its greatest shock in the advent of the rock and roll era. During this period, the Cajuns created their own version of this musical genre, which they fondly named swamp pop. The beat of this type of music is more in the same vein of Elvis Presley, and the instrumentation switches to steel guitar, upright piano, saxophone, and drum sets, while accordion, fiddle, and triangle, and washboard take a secondary role. Swamp pop lyrics are also mostly in English, given the decrease in the people who speak Cajun French. However, even with these changes, they managed to maintain a distinctive Cajun quality to their music that helps to set them apart. Here are two typical recordings of examples of swamp pop. The first is a recording of Sugar Bee by the Cleveland Croquettes, which is actually the first Cajun song to make the Billboard Hot 100. In it, you can hear the accordion still plays a very prominent role, but you do hear a definite swing to the rhythm, you do hear some steel guitar and a lack of French in the lyrics. The second recording I'm going to play for you guys is a recording by Al Terry, whose Cajun name is Alison Thoreau, in his performance of Good Deal Lucille. This recording prompted the readers of the Country and Western Jamboree to choose him over Elvis Presley as Best Singer of 1955. You will notice once again there's a change to the rhythm, which has a very strong country feel to it. There is also no accordion or the typical percussion instruments such as triangle or washboard. The song is mostly in English, but is unique in swamp pop for its use of the bilingual French and English.
Goodbye, Lou, cherchez-vous another man. C'est l'amour pour toujours if you can. You're high class, you got a pass, now you're a wheel. Ho, ho, good deal, Lucille. Go your way, leave today, that's your plan. Leave me here, cherchez-vous another man. Paint the town, sorrows drown, that's how I feel. Ho, ho, good deal, Lucille.
During the 1960s, there was something of a Cajun revival, or as some term it, the Acadian Renaissance. There have been attempts in the past to preserve the Cajun heritage, but it came into full force around 1968 with the establishment of the Council of the Development of French in Louisiana, or the very long abbreviated version of that, CODOFIL, as well as the French Heritage Committee, the FHC. There had been previous less successful attempts, but the CODOFIL and FHC were larger, more influential organizations than their predecessors and were able to use government grants to restore French into the school system. Musically, the Cajun Renaissance can be traced back to the Newport Folk Festival in 1964. Some of the more noteworthy performers who were at this festival were Gladius Thibodeau and Louis Lejeune. There were many mixed feelings about the traditional Cajun music that was being performed at this event, since the music was considered unrefined or embarrassing to many from that region. Anslet's book quotes from an editorial by Burton Grinstaff in which he illustrates these sentiments in the Daily World, published October 20th, 1956. Cajuns brought some mighty fine things down from Nova Scotia with them, including their jolly selves. But their so-called music is one thing I wish they hadn't. The first time my sensitive ears were shattered by the dissonant squall of Cajun music was in Eunice back in 1946. I was told that an acquaintance of mine, a fellow who seemed normal in other respects, was going to play Cajun-style accordion at some kind of local program. I was foolish enough to look forward to the event and even to think that I might be onto the discovery of something great that had been hidden from the rest of the country all these years. I broke through a window after the first stanza, went home, and doused my head in a bucket of water to drown out the sound. Grinstaffs ended his column with a prediction. I suppose there will be no containing them if they get a really bad needle on one of those records the Newport Festival people took back with them, and some of those modern folk people get an earful. All we can do is sit back and wait for the verdict, scared stiff. I'm not sure Cajun music is on trial in Newport. It may be us. Their verdict could subject us to tortures like the world has never known before. Thankfully, Grinstaff's rant about Cajun music was not shared by the audience at the Newport Festival. Records show that the old-time music received standing ovations and sparked a renewed interest in traditional Cajun music. The missing link between French Cajun language and the culture had been found in traditional Cajun music. One of the most prominent champions to come out of this festival was Dewey Balfa, a fiddle player from Louisiana, who was brought in at last second to perform with Thibodeau and Lejeune, according to Anslet's book. Dewey Balfa's message had a complex message and aimed in many directions at once. The festival not only provided exposure for musicians, but also presented them as cultural heroes, and in the same motion, made them available to the ones who needed them most. House dances had given way to public dance halls in the 1930s, and especially after Prohibition, only those 18 years old and older were able to hear traditional Cajun music with any regularity. Young people listened to what music they could hear, usually on records and radio. The festival helped to close the cultural generational gap by giving young Cajuns the opportunity to hear music of their heritage. Balfa formed a family ensemble called the Musical Brothers after the Newport Festival, and eventually that became the Balfa Brothers. Here's a quick clip of Dewey Balfa performing a song called I Went to the Dance with his young nephew Todd Balfa in a clip from Yasha Angsky's documentary, Le Blues de Balfa. The technique that he uses in here is called fiddlesticks, and it's a pretty common starting tool for a young fiddle player learning how to do Cajun music because it teaches you a strong Cajun beat.
Hier soir, toi habillé en noir, c'est sans l'habit que mon jeune pour courtiser ma belle.
As Cajun music and culture gradually began to be more widely appreciated all over, people began to start taking interest. Dewey Balfa accepted a professor position at the University of California in Fresno in 1987 for Cajun music and culture, and later the following year he took the same position at Southwest Louisiana as well. Along with his professor position, he also received the National Heritage Award in 1986 for his album Souvenirs, as well as being nominated for a Grammy Award in the ethnic music category. One of Balfa's more famous quotes on traditional Cajun music was made after performing for the 1985 Smithsonian Festival of American Folklife. Cajun music is like a tree. Its roots have to be watered or it will die. But watering the roots is not all. If a tree is alive, it has to grow, and that growth is important too. Most of the songs I play are about 100 years old. I am interested in preserving Cajun music. I have dedicated my life to assure that there will be lots of Cajun musicians in another 100 years. But that's not enough. Someone has to provide them with songs to play that will be about 100 years old then, so I've composed a few that I hope will still be around. Balva's words that day point out the importance of building on the foundation of tradition to make something new and alive. This is the situation Cajun music finds itself in today. Artists such as Michael Duché, who have carefully maintained much of the traditional quality of Cajun music, but have also incorporated jazz and rock and other styles to help make Cajun music more accessible to the average person. Here is a recording of Michael Duché and Sharon Shannon performing a very traditional La Danse de la Vie, or the Dance of Life. In contrast to this, I'd like to show you a little bit more of Duché's more adventurous work. The song is entitled Zydeco Gris-Gris. There's not really too much Cajun in it as far as I can hear, except maybe in the violin harmonies. It definitely has a more Middle Eastern feel to me. Once again, this was Beau Solier, probably one of the most famous Cajun bands. Zachary Richards, as we had mentioned, is another current artist who combines various styles, including Cajun, country, and Zydeco, which is similar to Cajun, but comes from different origins. It also developed in southwestern Louisiana, but the music comes from French Creole speakers. It is a little bit more rhythmic and sounds a little bit more like the blues. Typically nowadays it's also spoken in English rather than Cajun French. And here is an example of one of Ricard's first Cajun recordings, which is heavily influenced by country music. The song is entitled Marcher le plancher, Walk the Floor. I believe the song is something about a cowboy as well.
Sans parler pilules qui m'empêchent de dormir, de marcher le plancher avec des rêves doux de toi. Je passe tout mon temps accroché sur un pas pour détendre mes blues durant pas dans la course. Quand j'arrive à la fin, me trouve au début, et tout ce que j'ai gagné, c'est une triste mémoire. J'étais dans la ville pour jouer la vedette, allumer des feux, on bat les petites minettes. Mais faire affaire en chair, ça t'amène pas trop loin. Une femme pour l'aimer, c'est ce qu'un homme a besoin. Ni lune ni étoile vont briller ce soir. J'ai vidé la bouteille assez longtemps. J'ai marché des grands trous dans mes bottes de cowboy. Après marcher le plancher avec des rêves doux de toi.
All of this is not to say that Cajun musicians don't get carried away sometimes. There is even, believe it or not, Cajun rap.
Un, deux, 3, 4.
We'll tell you about us and it won't take too long. Now we present the Cajun rap song.
In contrast to this, you also have artists who are trying to return older traditions to the music. And you've already heard a couple examples, such as the Magnolia Sisters, which I played earlier. Another artist worth mentioning in this same camp is the accordion player, Bruce de Grepon. One of my favorite recordings of his is Acadia to Louisiana, which tells the story of the Acadian expulsion from eastern Canada. And it talks about how the Cajuns will have everybody beat in the end.
Pour prendre un grand voyage, ma famille est séparée, pour toujours être pour m'y casser. Acadie à la légende, un grand voyage pour notre monde, pour trouver la liberté et beau pays.
Cajun music has even exerted itself into mainstream American music scene as well. Today, there are soundtracks, classical compositions, and other musical works that have been influenced by or have sought to incorporate Cajun songs. One soundtrack that comes to mind is the music from the movie Electric Mist, which has a feature song by the artist Dirk Powell, who is a very traditional Cajun artist. The song translates to The Trembling Earth. This isn't the first time Cajun music has been featured in a musical score, though. To name a few songs or a few movies, The Big Easy in 1987, The Princess and the Frog, 2009, A Murder of Crows in 1998, Balthazar the Cajun in 1986, Southern Comfort in 1981, which actually features the Balfa brothers, and Schultz Gets the Blues in 2003, are just a couple of films featuring Cajun music. In classical music, pieces have been composed based on Cajun melodies and harmonies as well. This is especially true in the world of music education, where many seek to spark a renewed interest in the Cajun heritage for the next generation. Frank Ticelli has written a piece called Cajun Folk Songs for band, and it uses familiar pieces or ballads such as La Belle et le Capitaine, which, as we already know now, is an Acadian melody. For choir, there was an arrangement by Susan Blumsfeld of Fidodo, which is now an Acadian lullaby. And in orchestra, there is a piece called Evangeline, Two Cajun Songs, which was arranged by Michael Story. These songs use the melody from Tout un bout soir and some of the other traditional Cajun ballads as well. Besides music education and film music, there are other contemporary classical composers who have been influenced by Cajun music as well. Paul Hayden, who has been on the music faculty of Louisiana State University and Eastern Illinois University, has written several pieces with Cajun influences, including divertimento for flute and viola. In this particular piece, the final movement is entitled Cajun Riviera, in which the composer describes the work as making use of Cajun fiddling techniques, along with clashing polyrhythms between the two instruments. Continues on much the same way for the next couple of minutes. There are also new compositions being written by the next generation of young composers, such as Austin Theroux, growing up in Louisiana, having recently graduated from Rice University, has also composed another solo viola suite, where the fourth movement is entitled Cajun Fantasy. Outside of the U.S., however, Cajun music has made a big splash abroad. Many bands tour all over Europe and even as far as Asia. However, according to Bernard, it has made the biggest impact in Britain. A quote from Bernard's book states, "A parallel cult following took shape overseas, particularly in Britain and Northern Europe. British fans, for example, purchased imported Cajun music licensed to overseas labels, including Ace and Zane, and attended events such as the North Cornwall Cajun and Zydeco Festival, Mid Wales Cajun Zydeco Day, and London International Cajun Music Festival. They published fan letters, such as the Cajun User's Manual and the Cajun Times, and even established appreciation societies and their own bands. The irony of this popularity of Cajun music in Britain has not been missed by many South Louisianans, who are quick to point out that their ancestors were expelled by the British from Nova Scotia." In conclusion, Cajun music has taken many winding paths throughout history and has been influenced by many cultures. It has snuck into the hearts of many other genres of music as well, and is still a living, thriving genre of music today. One thing that has stayed central to Cajun culture and music is this attitude of laissez le bon temps rouler, let the good times roll. Although Cajun music isn't precisely prominent in day-to-day music that we hear, it certainly continues to be enjoyed by many who are savvy of its presence today. Thank you.